Split would walk in, but let's go ahead and get started. Susan, would you please do the roll call?
Sure. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, Wednesday, September 3rd, 2014, for the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority meeting. A roll call: Cindy Clark, Russ Collins.
Here.
Bob Gunsel. Roger Hewitt.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
Al McWilliams.
Here.
John Mowat.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr. Steve Powers.
Here.
Sandy Smith. John Split. We have a forum.
Thank you. So before we dive into audience participation, I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone for their good work. Hope everyone had a nice summer on the board, the staff, folks in the audience. You'll see we're a little light because for some people, summer hasn't ended. You know, some of us have kids in the schools. I think we're back in the trenches. But I thank you for your good work moving forward. Next is audience participation. I want to point out that we have 4 people maximum, 4 minutes each, and that we've had a person asked to be added. Mr. Chang Ming Fan is asked to be a 3rd speaker. Ellen Schulmeister.
Am I supposed to do?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah.
I am Ellen Schulmeister, and I am here from the Shelter Association of Washtenaw County, and I'm here to just present an idea for your consideration for possible funding, of course, because that's what we're always about, right? As you know, the Delana Center has been, it's over 10 years old now. I think it's 11 years old, and we are in a place where we have to, we feel as though we have to upgrade our camera security system from the analog system that we have with 4 cameras to a much larger system and one that's digital in order to keep the people who are at the Delana Center and the staff at the Delana Center safe. So we are looking at about a $27,000 project in order to add 17 cameras on our first floor, cameras in our stairwell, which we're now using, which we didn't use in the past, but we eventually have started using our stairwells. We just want to have a bit of security in the stairwell. And also outside and on our sleeping floors, we want to add a couple cameras for recording purposes. It is a higher level digital system, and we feel that it's time for us to do it, and given the numbers that we have and the numbers we had last winter with our wonderful polar vortex, that it makes it much easier for us to see what's going on in and around the building, and that can only help our management of the building and for the community and the neighborhood around us. So that's all that I really want to tell you, and so hopefully we'll be able to bring it to the board in a more formal application soon. Okay? That's it. Thank you.
Ellen Haber, World Peace Day.
Thank you. I'm Alan Haber, and I want to thank you for giving approval and sponsorship, bravo, to the International Day of Peace, which is a public event, accessible, participatory, family-friendly, inclusive, the best we can do for peace activity on the International Day of Peace, September 21st. Sunday on the Library Lane parking lot, Parked B Plaza, and we really are looking for a participation from all the communities of town while we deal with all the questions of parking rates and such detail and plantings. The situation of peace and war and struggle and anguish in the world overlays all our minds. And this is really, hopefully, an opportunity for people to come together, show the peace face of themselves, and see what we can do in a participatory way. In some way, I'm an advocate for the commons. There's also a knowledge commons, and people of Ann Arbor know so much about so many of the questions that anguish the world, and this is sort of an opportunity, metaphorically, to bring together on the commons and harvest some of this knowledge commons and see if we can't have a feast of our best ideas. And the Megiddo Peace Table will be there. There'll be music. There'll be a soapbox that everyone can have their say your piece for peace. And last night the City Council adopted a proclamation saying this will be for the City of Ann Arbor and all its parts, the International Day of Peace. enjoying with you and the sponsorship of inviting people to come to this place. And I have a copy of the current form of the leaflet description and the proclamation that I'll give around to you. But really appreciation, and we are very pleased to be able to work with Susan and the whole organization here. And I think this is a peaceful step forward toward the fall, and we should find ways of cooperation, and I think this will put a very good energy into that space for whatever other public events come forward. So thank you.
Next up,
proclamations. Maybe I'll go past them. You take a look. I didn't spared you actually reading this, but maybe the mayor will do it. We'll put it to your heart. We need peace.
Thank you. Cheng-Ming Fan.
Thank you. Is there a timer?
Yes.
It's my watch. I'll let
Okay,
you
you
know.
raise your hand at 3 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cheng-Ming Fan, inventor of Tiny Light, president of Tiny Light World, a really small company that we call the Tiny Light World, since 1996. And we had the honor 2004 present and demonstrate our light at Michigan Theater. And Ross is the one support. We put the highest building, and that is the basketball Tiny Light. So many years we have developed much more, developed a new technology, still called Tiny Light, especially Tiny Ear Light. It's so good to use in the public information media. However, it has to go a long process to learn because of LED light. When you come out to the public place, especially in multimedia, it's very, very complicated. And you remember in Boston, the mayor been fired and the police been arrested because of LED display. So we know that. That's why I'm here. That's why I have been here. I learned quite a lot, especially last night. I stood up before midnight, support John Split. A good man. I'm not associated with any political organization, but I support as a citizen of the United States and leave this town. I think that you and John and all the other people did a great job to make this city even better. Of course, there are a lot of problems. If there's no problem and there's no challenge and there's no life, the glass can always be half full and half empty. That is the life. There are the other side, which is my friend Jack, Sonny, Councilman, and they all support me. But I have to say, John Split spent so many hours, and especially drove a long way to the library, Middle Creek. Listen to what I'm trying to do to help the city using Tiny Light. And that is something which is I'm not only appreciative for what he has doing, and also have to say that deserve to be recognized. So as all the other people spend so many hours volunteer. This society has two problems. Number one, we polarize. Number two is that the way we help the poor people have to be modified. The poor people are laborers. They want to work, not just want to be given. How can we create jobs, especially manufacturing jobs? Especially mid-tech. That's why I'm here. Tiny Light is a mid-tech. Mid-tech is a good term. Henry Ford developed this. Assembly line. 1 minute left. So we should follow the footsteps, not just high-tech, not just free burgers, not just being served. I trust this council, this committee. I also trust the city council. And I hope we can work together, make this better, much more peaceful, beautiful, productive, and fair. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have reports from city boards and commissions. Mr. Ray Detter, Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council.
The Citizens Advisory Council takes off 2 months during the summer too. Whenever you guys take off, we take off too. But we did have some issues to be dealt with over the course of that time. But last night we started out our meeting. We were fortunate enough to have Susan Pauley there. And Susan started out the meeting by giving us very complete coverage with regard to what work you've been doing over the course of the last number of months, whether it's the framework plan, whether it's the partnership committee and the partnership work that you're doing, or the William 4th Avenue parking structure. Susan went over it all last night. Some of the people heard that stuff for the first time, but they were very impressed and very supportive of the work of the DDA. You're doing a great job, and we're delighted that we can participate in any way that we can in it. But last night, most of our meeting, again, because people were concerned about it, was devoted to the issue of the library lot, or library lane lot now, or block, or whatever it is that we want to eventually decide it. I, as a result of the last meeting, attended on August the 19th the meeting of the Parks Advisory Committee. You may or may not recall that at my last statement, that was 2 months ago, at that particular point, the committee had a plan to give $24,000 for the reorganization or redesigning of Liberty Plaza Park. And we took a position in opposition to that, because what we wanted really was a more complete sort of development of a comprehensive approach to the entire block itself. And I spoke on that before the Parks Advisory Committee. The Parks Advisory Committee, I think wisely, the money that was going to go for redesigning it is instead going to go into programming. And that programming will also perhaps be extended into what might happen in the future on the plaza that will be in 5th Avenue. And we think that that's the right direction to go. A lot of work and outreach has been done over the years on the issues of the library lot and developing an integrated planning. And it's really time that we use all of that information that we have. And the CCAC was involved in the 1991 Luckenbach-Ziegelman study. One of our members was also a part of that study. The Cawthorne Plan of 205 were all involved in that. Most recently, the DDA's Connecting William Street project. And PAC's own survey of public preferences for downtown parks, which just took place last year. And in all of these reports, connectivity of sidewalks, public, private, historic interest in properties, neighborhood associations, public interest groups, the DDA were all considered in the development of a carefully integrated block built on a broad vision for the area. Connecting Liberty Plaza and the proposed Liberty Library Lot Plaza have always been a major part of the planning. And of course, we're now talking about the federal plan to give a pathway next to Glade Transit Center in the north. And of course, we're very supportive of that and fits into the whole nature of what we had planned. And we hope that that also will be connected to across the street, whatever it is that's developed there. We also favor the possibility of a new tax-producing private or public development on the major part of that property. A development that will work cooperatively to integrate itself with and provide eyes on a future adjoining public plaza. In April, the City Council resolved that the city will work with the developer of the remaining portion of the Library Lane site to ensure that the designs for both spaces, an urban public park and the adjacent development, complement and support each other's successful uses. We're going to be talking a lot about this. We think this is very important for the future of the downtown. I know that you do too. And there are people who say, well, this isn't going to happen for a long time. It isn't going to happen at all unless we really work at it and keep in mind the fact that what we want really is a very coherent, organized approach to the whole nature of that block that includes Library Plaza, but also the plaza on the other side on 5th Avenue and all of the historic buildings around it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a kind of an exciting thing, a presentation on the DDA 5th Division project. Susan.
Thank you. This board meeting overlaps coincidentally with the International Downtown Association annual conference. And today, in our absence, the DDA is receiving a merit award. We submitted an application for our 5th Division project, and it was widely heralded by the award committee as being an example of a best practice project. And so I thought I would take just a few minutes today, talk a little bit about the project. Some of the board members around the table, some of the community members listening to this may not have been aware of what it is we did. and why this is a project also that we took the time afterwards to note the impacts. So with that, I'm going to launch right in. 5th and Division, before we began work, were and are the major one-way pair that connects the north side of town to the south side of town. At the time we began our work, we looked at them and tried to understand how their functioning was affecting downtown. That auto-centric design with wide lanes, traffic signals, time to get you through quickly, a lack of attention to the infrastructure. Buildings had turned their sides to the streets, so they weren't helping at all. We saw very little private investment happening. And frankly, the hardest part was understanding that it was bisecting the campus area from the Main Street area. Somebody referred to this at one of our first meetings as the hole in the donut. So we began with the ideas that we could knit together these two important sectors of downtown by beginning to look at the streets themselves. As part of what we did, it started at a retreat. Many of you know how our retreats work to generate new ideas. We distilled a focus on these streets into a planning process that culminated in an urban design workbook that built on the recommendations of the downtown plan, the central area plan, and all sorts of other city-approved policy documents. We hired Beckett and Rader. With their help, we steered a design process which included the Washtenaw Biking Walking Coalition, the merchant associations. We had Ray and other downtown residents participating. We developed a streetscape plan. We then faced some problems getting it actually implemented. At the time, it's hard to remember, but those curb bulb outs were considered to be a really scary idea. I was on Madison Street this weekend, and I shared with a couple of you, I was so impressed to see these built into that street resurfacing. Because when we took this on back in the early part of this decade, this was a concept that scared people that we would in fact be blocking traffic. There would be all sorts of traffic congestion. So we did a lot of traffic modeling, held a lot of meetings, and that still was a challenge for some people to overcome, that concern about congestion. Eventually the project did get approved. We were able to get a grant from the state, and we did our construction over 2 construction seasons. Our goals in all of this was to connect campus and Main Street areas. It was to encourage much more pedestrian activity, and very much to encourage the private sector to do what they do best, which is reinvesting in downtown. Part of what we discovered as a part of the project was that concern about congestion was addressed as almost a gift. Kitty corner to City Hall in the midst of the dialogue, MDOT, for whatever good reasons, chose to replace the curb cut. Their work obscured 2 of the 3 lanes in an area where there was concern about losing even 1 lane. And what we saw over the week of their construction was that traffic, once the cars understood what was going on, flowed beautifully, even on 1 lane. And again, our argument was allow us to put the bulb outs in, and at the most narrow points, we would have 2 lanes functioning. This real-life example was a chance for everyone to see it actually operating. And it was an opportunity for us to say, we think this could work. Let us go forward. After we did our improvements, just to remind people, our goal was to use up as much of that public right-of-way for human-based activities as possible, create opportunities to support the uses along the length, and again, encourage the private sector. Some of it was done with these bulb outs and sidewalk expansions. Some of it was done simply by adding on-street parking. We created bike lanes that ran the length of these streets, the goal of which was to connect to what we already had in place on Packard. What we've seen as a result of this, and I think you've seen it too, is many more people walking on 5th and Division. Many more. It used to be fairly common to not see many people. Many more people are walking north-south. Not saying it's done perfectly, but it's definitely improved. We've also seen much more foot traffic on Liberty and Washington, those east-west streets. Some of it is, again, the crossings feel more comfortable for people to make that journey between the east and the west parts of town. We've also seen significant reinvestment along these streets. We noted for our presentation to IDA how many businesses, in fact, had actually taken shape in the intervening couple years. We used as an illustration for them, though they don't know our downtown, Huron Street, which is also a very car-centric street. It was also a street the DDA was examining to do improvements on. We did not go forward with those improvements, but during the same time period, we also didn't see a whole lot of ground floor activity taking place. We've subsequently seen the 413 building and the hotel come in on Huron, but at the same time that 5th and Division were happening, Huron was not seeing a lot of private attention. So some of the elements of this were trying to find ways to make the pedestrian experience feel more comfortable. And some of that is narrowing in at the intersections. Some of it is making the streetscape itself feel more comfortable and attractive. Where you're not seeing on that lamppost, for instance, is there are banner poles. So we're encouraging nonprofits to put information and signage up on those banners. Trees and large, long lineal planters encourage the trees to get healthy and strong. We also thought in a multimodal way. Again, something that we now take for granted was a pretty big idea when we did this 10 years ago. So the taxi stand, bikes, seating, making sure everything connected with the buses that were running through the area. This was an important part of our planning from the beginning, was a multimodal use of these streets. We saw quite a lot of private reinvestment taking shape, as I mentioned. And some of what we demonstrated for them in our presentation was, here are examples of redevelopment opportunities, if you look at it that way, businesses, buildings, submitting to the city permits, actually documenting where it took place. And you can sort of see Huron Street at that point versus Division and Fifth. The mix of businesses, let's see, this thing will move forward. There it is. The mix of businesses was also important because downtown's diversity is among our strengths. So it was not just one particular kind of reinvestment taking shape. Everything from residential and groceries to restaurants and services. The crossings that were happening east-west were also important to note. Those bulb outs, though that's a very simple design element, serve a purpose, which is to encourage people to make the journey. Years ago, when the link was operating, one of its initial inceptions was to get people between Maine and State. That was how few people actually made the journey. And as an illustration of how many more pedestrians we're seeing, we just took a note of also the new businesses going in along Liberty Street. Some of this is because the foot traffic is strengthened. It's encouraging, Monte Osteria, Isolita, the Hanover building, other buildings along the stretches that may not have had as robust usage before the improvements went in. And I think, again, an illustration of the kinds of businesses that took shape. So this is just a very short snapshot. We don't often take a look backwards, but I thought it'd be important to acknowledge the award that IDA gave to the DDA and their congratulations that this was definitely seen as an important example of really good planning and really good implementation. And we see it ourselves every day on those sidewalks. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Susan. I think we all appreciate the amount of work that went into that project, and I think many of us feel very proud and very happy about how it turned out. It's nice to be acknowledged. Number 5, communications from the DDA chair. We were lax in not being clear about our committee chair assignments, so I want to make sure that it's clear that the appointed chairs for the operation committees include John Splitt, Keith Orr, and of course Roger Hugh. So I want to make sure that everyone understands and knows that they are acting as co-chairs for the operations committee. The second and very important thing is that we have a gathering at Bill's Beer Garden this evening at 5 o'clock. It's been posted, so we're legit, and I'd encourage anyone who can make it to come this evening and have a beer. Number 6, communications from DDA members. Have any? It's been a quiet summer, hasn't it?
No.
Do you want to talk about your LED lights?
Yeah, the shoot here's got LED lights in the marquee. Today we're supposed to close on the State Theater.
Oh, congratulations. Very exciting. One new element we've got on our agenda is we're going to have a standing opportunity for the executive director to report out the latest goings on.
There you go. So I was encouraged to talk about when I go see other downtown, so I'm going to begin with that. This summer I had a chance to go to Buenos Aires, Argentina, which was not something I had thought I'd be doing a few years ago, but it was a wonderful opportunity. For those, and I know some of you have been there, it's got a really wonderful European feel. It's a city with a lot of rich history and beautiful buildings, and a lot I got from it. For instance, their embrace of public art was wonderful. And their transit system is one of the best I've been around. It's a private system, but it's a very good transit system. But something else that struck me was absolutely every sidewalk that I walked on had gaping holes. I mean, they were in some of the worst shape of sidewalks I've seen, and I've traveled through Southeast Asia and Europe and beyond. It was striking how deteriorated the walking area was. And in the week or so that I was there, I saw only one individual with clear disabilities trying to heroically make his way down a sidewalk because the sidewalks were so impassable. People with anything other than the strongest of limbs likely felt that they were not being encouraged to be there. And it made me think of the DDA. As travel often does, you think about what you have back home, and it made me think of the DDA. We take for granted the work that you do, and so much of it maybe goes unheralded, the work that you do this summer. For instance, we've been maintaining sidewalks with brick repairs. Bike hoops have been swapped out that are deteriorated for new ones. We're about to plant about 130 street trees. We kind of take it for granted because we've been doing this for a while, that we forget that when I started 20 years ago, we used to have a group of about 20 city staffers walking with me. There was so much deterioration downtown. It took this team 2 full days to note all the problems. Now we don't need to do those walk-arounds because so much has been addressed, and as we continue with these ongoing repair projects, our sidewalks don't reach the place that, unfortunately, Buenos Aires is at this point. So it's just a reflection back to you. One of the reasons you do these trips is to get a sense of perspective, and I was renewed in my appreciation that we've made this commitment. Some of the other things that we've done that I think are worth noting is when I began years ago, we inherited a very deteriorated parking system. We made a commitment at that point, if the community would get behind us, we would begin and in an ongoing way maintain a repair commitment to these garages. This summer, without a whole lot of fanfare, we're underway with this summer's improvements. The maintenance projects include the unglamorous work like repairs of concrete and deck coating and painting, and we're underway in these garages. And 20 years ago, this would have been worth front page news, but it's something that we do in an ongoing way, so maintenance can help us to prevent major repairs down the road. This summer, it also came to mind the work that the DDA is doing has been evolving, and I just thought I'd end today by noting, just to put it in some sense of perspective, because downtown's evolving, your willingness to stay nimble and to stay focused on what downtown needs today and not just continue what we did 20 years ago is something to be heralded. Though we don't know exactly where we're going, we know the right questions need to be asked. An example, we're exploring the idea of a retail incubator at the 4th and William Garage. We haven't made a commitment yet. We don't know if this is something we're going to pursue. But we know that retail is challenged downtown. It's very hard in the era of Amazon to get a foothold. Very hard with high rents, with restaurants able to pay more, frankly, than retail can, for a retailer to get a foothold. If we can, with something like a retail incubator, encourage the next retailers, perhaps that's a way to encourage that our downtown retail mix remains strong in the coming years. Again, we haven't quite made the final decisions, but the exploration that the DDA is willing to undertake is important. Something else that I think is important is 20 years ago, we saw ourselves as a capital improvements agency. But a lot of what we're doing these days, I would point to being more economic development. An example was the release last week of this market trends report. What are the demographic data points in downtown? What should we be thinking about in terms of what the commercial rents are? Amber and Al and the marketing committee is going to be finishing up the State of the Downtown report. This is a collection of data that no one else is putting together, and it's a way for us to help encourage the private sector to do what it does, which is to find their way into downtown to reinvest. And for me, perhaps most pioneering is the exploration around the concept of a possible downtown ambassador program. I know we're a ways away from any final decisions on it, but the fact of the DDA looking into place management as a potential area that the DDA would get involved in is a dialogue that's happening across the country. You're hearing it about the downtown parks. You can't just build it and expect they're going to succeed. There's a better and deeper understanding that you've got to manage them once you have them in place. So this exploration, however it lends itself to a final outcome, is important that you're willing to take that on. So I'm going to leave right there. Don't have more reports because your agenda is about as full as it can get. But just an acknowledgement, because with the new school year, we think of September as our New Year's Eve. I want to look forward with all of you to the coming months. I think we've got a lot of important work to do, and I look forward to doing it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Next item, approval of minutes on page 4 through 25. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Joan? Support. Support Roger. Any questions, concerns? Seeing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next item, subcommittee reports. Our first subcommittee, Partnerships, Economic Development. Joan and Al.
Okay. We first had a little bit of a discussion about recommended changes to our grants policy, which is kind of, I think, will always be a work in progress. It's continues to be amended. It's mostly, I think, mostly Amber has been working with city staff and the design review board. So Amber, do you want to just say a few words?
I don't know, I think Susan maybe will, yeah.
Okay, we'll get Susan. I was trying to divide up the responsibility.
Yeah.
We'll get Amber later.
We'll get there
Yeah.
later. So we have been refining the language of the policy to make sure we're in alignment with how the city actually refers to its own planning documents. And to complete that, our new chair and I met with the design review board a couple weeks ago and asked if there were ways that this grant policy could be strengthened to lend support to their own work. Their efforts, of course, are to ensure that the buildings we have downtown fit in the context in which they're placed and are attractive buildings and add to the environment. So there's an addition to our grant policy that came as a result of that dialogue. It is very much a work in progress. Look forward to people's comments on it.
You know, one quick thing to add to that I thought was very interesting and relevant to our work is that I think many people think of the design review board as really just looking at individual buildings, just sort of a one-off building, but very much part of their work is looking at the context of those buildings, what the block that they're on, the scale of other buildings, the functions, the uses. So that mates perfectly into when we look at street framework. You know, they were very interested and excited in the street framework plan, and we were interested that their view is broader than just individual buildings.
Okay, so probably at our next meeting in October, we'll bring these changes here for a vote. We'll have some more discussion and partnership and then bring them to the October DDA meeting. Speaking of partnerships, we've had a grant request for 318 West Liberty, which is that Alex DePerry project that's residential condominiums, and it's in the current site of what is now a car wash. So a few of us went over there to look because a site visit is a prerequisite to granting the request. Basically, you know, the way that our grants work is that we will contribute if it looks like there is something that is part of a public benefit that otherwise would not be done and that is being required. And in this project, they found to their surprise that city staff was requiring a larger water main than exists now. Now, there's some dispute about that, and so I think at our partnerships meeting next week, Alex DePerry is going to be there to tell us what he knows. He may not know for sure, but the grant request would be for us to help with this issue of the expansion of the water main. So we went over to the site and looked at it. We looked at what kinds of possible other developments might spring up in the area if the water service were expanded, and those are the kinds of things we'll be looking at when we determine whether to agree to this grant request. Anything else?
So is that is it the idea is like if the project, I should say, it needs to go above and so the idea was that this was to go for what goes above and beyond what's required. So if the city doesn't require it, then this would be to go beyond that to what is required, or is it the other way around?
I think that if the city ends up not requiring it, that there won't be a grant request. The grant request is for this added cost that to change it from a 6-inch water pipe to an 8-inch water pipe.
Okay, so we should probably just look at that in the meeting, because as it's written right now, the idea is to not fund things that are required by the city, but only things that are required above and beyond what's required by the city, or at least that's where it was before. So if it changes in format, that's fine. But as it's written right now, that probably wouldn't, as I understand it, fall into place.
All right, we'll have to talk about that at partnerships. Anything, you were there, Al, anything else you want to add on that?
No, just that, I mean, until we know what the requirements are, there's kind of nothing to do until the final say is done.
Yeah, so at this point, we're kind of monitoring it and seeing where it's going. But that's, as far as I know, the only grant right now that's in the pipeline. So our next meeting is next week, September 10th, at our new time, 11 o'clock, right here.
Very good. Marketing committee. Al McCoy.
So immediately following that meeting, we'll be having a new committee meeting, which has been separated out at 12:30 on the second Wednesdays. Marketing committee, of which we still only have a few people committed to showing up. So such exciting things will be covered this time that I encourage you all to come and be recruited for my committee. Those things being the State of the Downtown report, we have a draft being prepared. So we're going to go over that. I've been working on it a little bit. These folks have been working on it a lot. So we're going to go over and develop that piece. A lot of the stuff in there is from this market trends report, which is a very basic set of, I don't know if everyone's seen it in the past. It's demographic information, economic information, what's rent right now, kind of set of graphs and charts. So used a lot by brokers and people trying to convince folks to put their businesses downtown. So take some of that stuff, incorporate it in the State of Downtown report. We'll be going over that at the next committee meeting, which is, again, second Wednesdays, 12:30, immediately following the partnerships.
Oh, well, you've got Mr. Collins sitting right next to you. You could encourage him. He's a marketer.
He was nodding.
A marketer.
I took that as
marketer from
confirmation.
way back.
Yeah. It's all. I wrote
Sounds
you down
good.
on the, yeah.
That was a hard commit.
Yeah.
Let me put it on my calendar.
Thank you. Next, Finance Committee. Commissioner Ryan.
All right, so this is my first Finance Committee report, and as my predecessor was well versed in this, like it was the back of his hand, I'm going to fumble through it and look to him to help me along. So yeah. So we had so the Finance Committee is a new committee of sorts, split off of the Operations Committee, focus on all things finance, very exciting. Feel free to come after a Marketing Committee meeting, which is also very exciting. So in our Finance Committee meeting, we went over the 2014 year-end financials, unaudited, as everyone sees, pages 30 through 40. So we can glance through that if everyone wants. Everything turned out as was expected. There weren't any issues or any glaring red flags or anything like that. One thing we did talk about with these year-end financials is because of how the auditors want to review finances, we're going to start presenting them with TIF and housing together, but still sub-separate for us to be able to see, and parking and parking maintenance together, but still somewhat separate so we can see. For the auditors, it doesn't matter. It's housing, or it's TIF and parking, and housing is just a subsection, but we want to be able to isolate those things and just look at them for our own knowledge. So we're just kind of changing a little bit around. So we're going to be, show some new presentation which still has all the same information, but maybe in a little bit of a different format than everyone's used to. So that might take some questions. And obviously, Joe is an expert, so he can always help with anyone who needs some guidance in that. Am I missing anything in that part? All right. Draft financial analysis for 4th and William construction. So we have we've been working on analyzing construction on the 4th and William lot. Specifically, we know we need to tackle the elevator and stairs issue. And we have also been exploring what are some of the other things we can do at the same time. So this is page 41 to 42. So there's a budget there. Back in May, we authorized $5 million, and we are now kind of just getting estimates, looking at costs, and actually looking at some other project elements and determining what can and cannot be done at the same time, what should be done, what kind of those costs are. We're working with Carl Walker, and we've met with them a couple times. I think operations has met with them, and then finance has been involved a little bit here and there. We don't have a draft out this meeting, right? We don't have we're not approving anything for this meeting, right? Okay, yeah. So this is just all draft right now. We're still getting costs. We're still working on them for different costs. You can see some of the projects that we're looking at. The projects above under discussion are pretty much, we know this needs to be done. Southeast stair and elevator, facade improvements at the entry and exits. We're just kind of working through some of those logistics right now. The other elements under discussion that we're looking at are an awning on the south and east sides of the building that hopefully would enhance the streetscape, enhance the pedestrian experience. We have a lot of traffic because of the bus stop that we now have this the ticket entrance at our facility there. So we're looking at some of that. Susan mentioned in her report, we're looking at possibly building in a retail incubator. The idea being that this retail incubator, as I understand it, is for enhancing retail, startup retail projects. So, from the finance committee perspective, we're just looking at the straight costs and what that would be. This is on the high end, I believe, and we are exploring with them what the low end would look like, just so we have the full range. And then some other more extravagant facade improvements that we might be able to entertain, but probably will not make it. So these are the kind of the overall broad level view picture of the cost, and then we have a lot of details on that as well. Yeah, I have a lot to talk about. Okay, so any questions or anything on the budget? Doing all right still, Ryder? Thank you. All right. All right. So the next thing we talked about at the finance committee meeting were parking rate changes. So we haven't had a parking rate increase for 2 years now, and then we did a review of our 10-year plan. As a new finance committee member, I learned a lot about the 10-year plan and the future of the DDA, so it was very enlightening. I suggest everyone review the 10-year plan. It's very interesting. But our 10-year plan takes into account some increases so that we can cover the cost of inflation and other cost increases. So we have a recommendation on parking rate changes, and our next step is to hold a public hearing at the October DDA meeting, and then the resolution will be presented then. So this is my first go around on a parking rate increase. Is there anything else I need to present?
No, see the chart that describes what we're looking at.
Oh, yeah. That's
on page 43, I believe.
Sorry.
I think what we want to emphasize is that probably the least desirable parking, the hourly parking in the parking structures, we're going to keep level. We're not going to increase that. Everything else is incrementally going up a dime for hourly and $10 a month for monthly. The idea of trying to get as much spread between the most desirable parking and the least desirable parking in keeping with our demand management approach. And I point out that this overall revenue increase of about $900,000 is actually slightly less than 5%, or about 5% of what our annual revenue is. So we don't plan on doing this every year, but if we're going to keep with the roughly 3% growth we projected in the 10-year plan for revenue, it's time to do at least a modest increase.
Great. Any questions there? All right, cool. And next committee meeting, Tuesday, September 30th, 8:30. We switched the time from late night, which was apparently something only I liked, to in the morning, which worked with everybody a little bit better. So well, yeah, John and I didn't want to get here. We'll make some sacrifices. So Tuesday, September 30th, 8:30 a.m. Rumor has it Roger is bringing coffee and donuts for everybody, so I may have made that up, but you know.
Stopping to revive on the way over.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, at least you're making it entertaining.
Well.
Yeah, I like it. So here's the king of entertainment, Operations Committee, Mr. Johns.
Yeah, the king of
Roger
entertainment.
Hewitt.
The first thing on our list is a resolution in your board packet on page 44. And this resolution is for a grant to AAATA to build a pedestrian walkway at Lake Transit Center. Michael Ford first came before the Partnerships Committee and was asked to come to operations. We felt pretty strongly that this was a good connection between our parking structures and therefore belonged in the parking realm. As all of us know, when we built the library lane parking structure, we were stressing the walkway between Division and 5th, sort of a mid-block crossing, because that block happens to be so long, and this would continue that walkway through to 4th Avenue and do a very nice job of connecting our two parking structures. From the AAATA's perspective, they want a more designated area for pedestrians, something that's a little bit clearer in terms of separating bus traffic and pedestrian traffic along the mall. And there is some fencing involved with the federal government's parking lot. There are a number of things involved here. As you can see, the resolution asks us for $125,000 in this fiscal year, $125,000 in the next, and I guess I ought to move this before I talk about it this much. I'd like to move this resolution.
Support.
Thank you. So
Can we
I
discuss
see, yeah, I see that Mr. Ford is also here if anybody has any questions for him regarding this.
Michael, I think the attraction for the DDA is that this starts to continue the sort of mid-block pedestrian connection that may ultimately connect the State Street and Main Street areas, although that certainly would be a long time off. But one of the key parts would be a pedestrian crosswalk in the middle of that block. Have you been in contact with city staff on the likelihood of that happening?
We'll need to talk to them about that. We need to, obviously see where we get with this, and then I think the next discussion will be.
Yeah. Okay. Because one of the design ideas that we had when we built Library Lane was that you would start this connection through what is the largest block in downtown, and start an east-west connection. This would again take it in one more block, so I'm very supportive of it. I just obviously the crosswalk between the two sidewalks would be critical to its ultimate success. But
Just as a point of order, I want to point out that we have 8 members here today. We need 7 as a quorum, and I believe Al is abstaining. So I just want to point out, so if there are folks who have particular concerns about this project, it's a good time to ask those questions.
Is the timing of the resolution for this month something that's important for the project?
Yeah, I'd like to be able to secure it and let the folks needing to get together to work through the particulars.
Okay, so it's not like something that can wait a month or a couple months, ideally.
This is my 3rd appearance.
I'm just checking because we got some empty seats here, so I'm just thinking out loud.
Besides, he's a short timer, so
yeah.
Yeah, I think, and to answer your question too, Rishi, is that we might like to have more of our members here to discuss it, but we have discussed it in other committee meetings, and I think it's a chicken and egg thing, is that we might want to see some more developed ideas before we go ahead with it for sure, but they can't go ahead with creating those ideas unless they know where the funding's coming from. So.
Yeah, a couple of things that we had brought up was the bollards, if there are options for that, which are very expensive, and potentially the treatment of concrete, so it's not quite as much of a sea of concrete. So some of those design elements are things that we're hoping to.
We'll definitely work with the DDA on that, and we're minimal to some changes. I know that you mentioned that people are sitting on the ballards on the other side of Library Lane, so we wouldn't want that to continue. So we might want to do something a little bit different.
And see about the resolution, whereas the DDA will be involved in the design process. So,
Yeah, they promised to keep us involved in things, and also like to point out that both the partnerships and operations committees seem to be very much in support of this grant.
Well, if no one sees a compelling reason that it needs to go back to committee, it sounds as though we can vote on this resolution. Any other questions, concerns?
One question is in terms of the FY15 and FY16 budget, is this?
Yeah, that's about it.
Or is it?
So,
That's correct.
what came through committee was our fiscal years don't line up directly with the ATA budget. And so a grant from this fiscal year, which would be paid out before June 30th, would be followed by a grant the following year. Their fiscal year, I think, begins October or November. So the construction project would be more aligned with their fiscal year than our fiscal year. So as opposed to giving it all at one fiscal year. And the second thing that was important to committee was that the resolution read that it would be paid out upon receipt of invoices.
Where is it coming from out of the budget?
It would be coming out of parking.
And a question for Michael. Are there any, this is somewhat related but somewhat off track of the specific resolution before us, but are there any other wish we had done this types of discoveries as you've moved into the Blake Center and other
we wish you could have acquired more of the parking area, but that's been a long-standing concern. We do have provisions if we are able to acquire more land to knock out part of the facility to expand, but that's been basically a 10-year process, and we've try to do everything that we can. We'd like to have some more room if that was possible, but I think from the standpoint of, I don't know if you're referring to recent articles or something like that, but
well, in terms of if there are other requests that you're anticipating making or other needs that you've identified now that you've been in the center for a period of time?
No, I think that we're looking at just the pedestrian walkway. Obviously, if there's opportunities for more of an intermodal hub opportunity there, I think we'd like to see U of M and maybe Megabus at some point. But those are incremental things that we will be looking at in the near future. But the convergence of everyone together, I think, is a great concept, and we'd like to try to make that happen at some point in the future.
we have any other questions, concerns?
So I'll just bring up some of just one thing. So this will be in 2015, 2016, is that correct?
No, it's split between the current fiscal year, which is
14, 15. Okay, 14, 15.
And the second half.
We are now in 15.
Right, okay. Yeah, we are in 15,
now,
right.
And so half will be in 15.
15 and half will be 16. Okay, you're right. So that's what I wanted to just, and it's going to be coming from parking. So in 16 and 17 and 18, we are kind of in some trenches in terms of our fund balances, in that we want to be cognizant of the money that we spend, in that projects that we choose now will limit projects that we choose future, because we are our fund balance ratio is something that we're monitoring as as we've been told by our auditors, and as Joe kind of has explained to me. So that doesn't mean that doesn't mean there's not money for it specifically, or that this isn't a good project. I'm just commenting on that. It's not like no big deal. We'll have plenty of money to do other projects as well. Just something to take into account. We should be looking at how we prioritize this project over future projects, which we don't know anything about. But this is obviously an important project to a lot of us. So just something to keep in mind.
And one thing I have to mention, that now that we have a finance committee that is meeting monthly, we are going to be looking at expenditures as well as committed money on a monthly basis. So we'll have, every month we'll have a good idea of where exactly we are financially, where we're going to be at the end of the budget year. So we can, I think, accurately report to the board when new projects and new grants, so forth, come up, what impact they're going to have on our budget. And I should also probably mention that Tom Crawford, the city CFO, is also on that committee and is going to be present at all those meetings.
One of the reasons we picked 8:30, he trumped me, so.
We are on the chair.
So Rishi, I noticed that you've gone from being one of our fun, uplifting members to
I know,
being kind of a Debbie Downer.
I know, I'm such a Debbie Downer. I can't wait to get out of this. No, I'm kidding.
All right, seeing no other questions, concerns, are we ready to call the question? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
One abstention.
I thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for hanging in there and coming
Thank you.
in 3 times.
Thanks for all your time.
All right, thank you.
Next on our agenda, did you want to take the parking comparisons, Mr. Hewitt?
Did I?
Would you?
Sure.
Pages 46 and 48.
I'll do this with that. Okay, so as you look on page 46, looking at the fourth quarter of this past fiscal year that ended in on June 30th, with this fourth quarter. Again, demand continues to be strong, revenues continue to be strong. Joe's annotated where we've had significant increases or decreases, but you can see overall revenues are up about 4% and hourly patrons are up a little over 2%. So the trends that we have really been seeing since we got out of the recession are continuing, and certainly want to compliment Republic Parking on doing an excellent job of managing the system and maximizing the revenue in a very efficient manner. Go to the next page, page 47. For the last year, not quite as rosy as the fourth quarter, but again, revenues up over 3%. Positive growth in hourly patrons. As we know, hourly patrons vary depending on a number of factors, and some of which is, how long they're staying. This is actually numbers of tickets pulled, not necessarily number of hours stayed. But again, overall, we're approaching $20 million in revenue, and continue to see steady growth in the system, the revenues of the system, and the use of the system. And I think this is the comparing 14 and 13, there were no rate increases in 14. So this is an actual increase in volume, both dollars and patron and uses of the system, because there's no rate increase baked into that 3% revenue increase. So essentially, use of the system went up 3%, which is good steady growth.
No additional parking spaces came online of any significance?
None of any. First and Washington did come online. So yeah. Yeah. Fifth and William went away. First and Washington came online. First and Washington, if I'm correct, has about 250 spaces. Fifth and William had a little over 100. So yeah, there was a net gain, although it was not large.
So it looks as though, in general, hasn't been a big increase in the number of patrons, but the length of stay.
Yes.
Increased.
And I should mention on the First and Washington structure, we thought that was going to be mostly a daytime structure with the primary use by the apartment dwellers above, but we're finding very strong nighttime usage in that structure. Surprising amount of usage. I remember walking home shortly after it had been open and seeing it go from one space available to 0. In the first month or two it was open, which is very unusual for a new structure.
I think that service lot on Ashley fills up really fast, and since you're on Ashley going straight towards First and Washington, I think that just pipes everybody. So yeah, dinner time is packed at that service lot.
It again shows the strength of the downtown night activity in the Main Street area.
Roger, one question. The only significant drop I'm seeing is at Forest. Wondering if Joe can...
I think construction ended. There was a lot of U of M construction for a lengthy period of time, and the construction workers were using that. And inevitably, when there's a quick drop off of usage, it takes a little while for that to backfill in. But I would imagine we'll see that being right in the heart of the student center, filling back in pretty quickly.
I think they started a new construction project too, right near there, so that's going to happen again.
As long as they don't close the East Quad again.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually they are. They're both the business school and the School of Education have some major projects going on. Okay. Any other questions? 48 is just the list of monthly parking permits by facility. You can see we have just under 4,400 monthly permits spread through the area, through the system. Questions? Concerns? Okay, great. Done.
Next, Downtown Ambassador Program. I'm wondering if, Susan, you will take this and tell people where we are in the process.
So the board committed itself to exploring what an ambassador program might look like downtown. It's not a common program in Michigan, but they're in use all across the rest of the country. When Grand Rapids created its own ambassador program a couple of years ago, some of us went there to understand it by seeing it ourselves, and were wowed, particularly by the part we hadn't really thought much about, which was the importance of the hospitality that an ambassador can offer downtown. So we've been exploring this, getting as much as we can through facts and internet searches. Our next step is to meet with 2 companies that we selected through an RFQ process to hear from them directly about how an ambassador program might work in downtown Ann Arbor. They were selected because they have extensive experience in ambassador programs across the country. They are different in their approaches. How they might view the downtown of Ann Arbor will be helpful to us because we'd like to sort of understand it from their professional perspective. Next Wednesday, which is the 10th, starting at 1, sorry, Al, wherever Al is, we're going to be cutting marketing short. But starting at 1, we're going to interview the 2 teams. We'll probably go until 4:30 or 5, and we'll be asking a lot of questions. They have provided us an RFP response So that information has been made available to the board, so you have a chance to read it in advance. And at that point, the operations committee can continue in its dialogue and bring back to the full board its recommendations about pursuing it or not pursuing an ambassador program. If so, what it might look like, and if so, what kind of company, if not the exact company, people might want to hire. What we asked for from these companies was to help us to understand the two components that an ambassador program are particularly strong in. On one side, ambassador programs are really good as eyes and ears. Some people think immediately the police, but it's also useful for social service agencies. It's also useful when that trash can gets missed on a trash pickup. And instead of having someone calling and complaining to the council, can we have somebody out and about seeing these things and making a call in to say we missed a trash can on the corner? So eyes and ears are an important part of what an ambassador program does. The other thing they do in a really important way is they are a welcoming presence in downtown, that whole idea of hospitality. When our wayfinding went in, there was skepticism that, of course, we'd all get our information from little handheld devices. And yet I see people all the time at our kiosk maps reorienting themselves. Where are they compared to campus or compared to where they are to the Machine Theater? Ambassadors are like that as well. They're people that say, can I help you? Are you looking for something? Can I help you find the building? Did you know it's restaurant week? Here's a list of participating businesses. Here's a map of downtown. Let me give you something you can walk away with and have in your pocket. Grand Rapids took it all the way to the day we were there. It was pouring rain, buckets. And they had individuals standing there with an umbrella helping someone while they were in their wallet trying to get coins out to feed the meter. Hospitality can take all sorts of forms, but really what it comes down to is welcome to our community. We're glad you're here. Can I assist you? So we're going to hear from the ambassador companies next week, kind of how they approach this, on what level, what range of those kinds of activities they see Ann Arbor is utilizing. So again, next week, people are welcome to sit in on the interviews. The operations committee is going to continue to do its research.
Thanks, Susan. Street framework plan, I'm guessing this is going to be Amber?
This is our opportunity to get Amber on.
So we are working with our advisory committee on finalizing the street types. Spent a lot of time with that committee looking at the ground floor uses and understanding how the needs of, say, those business-focused streets differ from the more civic-focused streets. And then we've also looked to our transportation plans and the way that people use the roadways to understand the transportation emphasis. So we've taken those two components and are near finalizing our street types. And then our next step will be to create guidelines by street type. And our next advisory committee meeting is September 9th at 9 a.m. So anything else to add, Roger, John?
I guess the only thing I would add is that it sounds as though it's clean and simple, and it's maybe anything but, in that, this effort to try to define how streets function, what's their emphasis? Bicycles, is it retail, is it transportation, is it this, is it that? So I think the advisory committee tried to do a good job of, what's the highest and best use for various streets, and then how that maps onto the transportation system. And it's a fascinating exercise when you look at downtown. We have a surprisingly complex downtown. There are a lot of different things going on and competing for that right-of-way space. So I think it'll be very interesting and important when we have something to show and share with people, that folks really try to take the time to look at it and react to it. You folks who are, hands-on downtown and experiencing it, I think it's going to be important to have as many eyes as possible on it and giving input. So, thank you.
City Council work session on Monday, September 8th. I know that we will be there presenting council with parking information. Roger, do you have anything to?
No, we'll be giving a presentation both of required report on the status of the parking system, what our future plans are, as well as some brief overview of what other activities the DDA is getting into. And I would certainly appreciate as many other board members there as possible.
I'll be there.
Thank you, Steve. Which side of the podium will you be on?
I'll be flip-flopping back and forth.
Depends on where the discussion goes. 4th and William stair elevator replacement update. It looks like, I think we do have time to give the PowerPoint.
If we could go back
Yes.
just briefly to the presentation to council, it might be helpful to have Susan, perhaps after the parking portion of the discussion, it might be helpful for Susan to give a version of what she just gave us earlier on our agenda, at least the portion of how her observation, which I agree with, is that the DDA has shifted or is shifting from a very capital projects intensive organization to one that's doing much more. I think that might help set some of the context for the following discussion of the issues that we will be clearing up as a DDA and that might be brought up by council or council members.
And in the context of economic development, which is obviously on people's minds.
So some version of what you shared with us earlier, Susan, might be helpful.
Great. I look forward to it. While I'm here, I don't know that we touched on the connector study. Roger, you want to announce your public meeting?
Oh, I skipped right by that, didn't I?
Nice try. Yes. The steering committee for the connector study has reached some recommendations on both route and mode, as well as a number of costs, both operating and capital costs, and we are going to be presenting this in two public meetings on the 17th of September, I believe that's Wednesday, in this room. One meeting is at 4 and one's at 6:30. There'll be a lot of boards up to show people. There'll be a PowerPoint presentation by our consultants, and we are certainly looking to inform the community of what we have preliminarily, decisions we preliminarily reached, as well as get community feedback on how they're reacting to those, the findings we've come up with. So I encourage everyone to come and get filled in on it. I think we're probably at some point after either in October or November, we'd like to give that PowerPoint presentation to the board here also.
So I'm going to launch into a presentation of the materials that were provided to Operations Committee members by our engineers at Carl Walker Inc. and our architect Carl Lukenbach. This is to give you a sense of where we are in our examination of what can be done to make improvements at 4th and William. The approach we're taking is as a master planning exercise. We may not implement everything, but at least we need to understand how the pieces could fit together. So with that, I'm going to launch in. Anyway, here we go. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is that ground floor commercial space. We spent a fair amount of time on that just to understand it. Setting aside the operations, I've met with a representative of Think Local First and the SBA to understand what kind of incubator services could be provided. The exercise that Ops is looking at right now is just simply what does the space look like and how could it function. So with this, I guess we jumped right to the stair elevator. Let's start with there. Sorry, shift backwards. So the first thing we're looking at using the stair and elevator as the central point is how to make improvements in a garage that was built in the early 1950s. I believe with the demolition of First and Washington, this is either the oldest or it's rivaling Maynard for the oldest garage. So what you have today is a fairly up-to-date, new age parking garage if 1950s is your standard. If it's not your standard, it feels oppressive, it feels closed in, it feels dark. The elevator operates about as slow as can be. We actually have people walking all 8 flights because by the time they've done the 8 flights, the elevator may have reached the ground floor. We are stuck with that elevator because by making anything really more significant in improvements, we trigger the 2014 building code. That building code includes issues like the cab is too small, it needs to now accommodate a gurney. That means the elevator shaft is too small. You can't just put new equipment in, you've got to understand what the building code is now requiring. So we're looking at improvements to that stair and elevator that would allow us to make those improvements. What you're seeing here is an image of a new lobby that would gain us probably at least 3 or 4 extra feet. The walkway today is so tight, we have people in the drive lanes all the time to get to their cars. because no one likes to be in close proximity to other people. This expanded lobby would be achieved by pushing everything toward the east. The cashiering and all of that would be eliminated. The build out and so forth might happen, but we would gain space by moving the drive lane in and out to the east. Gain some square footage. You can see illustration of that glassed-in open stairwell, that sort of floating stair that Carl Luckenbach designed for us at Library Lane. You're starting to see the images of how that would look. Trust me, this is not what you see today. And there we go. There is the external side of the garage. I think we shared this with you at the time the board authorized the improvement project. The plan would have a 3-phase construction so that we can continue to operate one of the most busy garages in one of the most busy sections of downtown, even as construction takes place. So if you look, let's see if I've got, no, I don't have a laser. In the bottom picture where you see that blue car, there's a notch out area in the garage. We would, in our first phase, build a glass enclosed stairwell that would be open and feel far more comfortable. When that is completed, the second phase would be to take the existing stair and jackhammer the treads, create a new elevator shaft, put a new elevator in. Phase 3 would then be take the existing elevator, replace it. So we'd end up with 2 functioning elevators and a bank of elevators and a new stairwell. So during the construction, we need to keep the garage open, so we've had some initial dialogues with the Main Street Association about timing and sensitivity around that. We would need to refine the project scheduling, but likely this would take place over at least 2 construction seasons. There we go. This is an image I think we shared with you also at the board meeting when we made our approvals. You see over the entranceway an enhancement to calling out the entrance. Just to be sure people know that we're planning this as part of that stair elevator. The introduction of the material of glass, something we learned through this is one of the reasons the garage has somewhat oppressive feelings about it is it's one of the few buildings, if not the only building in downtown without windows. So we're used to buildings glittering. This is something our architect pointed out to us. The fact that there's nothing, it's a dull space, helps to give it to the pedestrian. This it feels different than walking by any other buildings. And so he's introducing through a design choice more glass so the building feels more alive. And that's probably not what an architect.
Susan?
Yeah.
Just one other thing. At the last presentation, they also had an alternate that they presented for that element over the entrance of illuminated panels that would include signage in as a possible.
I think it may be at the end of this.
Oh, is it?
I think.
Sorry,
well,
I just want to make sure.
No, I think we may be getting to, but that point is important because also calling it out so that no one takes it for granted with all the distractions in downtown. You need to know exactly where the entrance is. So they've refined this, absolutely. This is the awning that's under exploration. Not only the Greyhound, but if we did a retail build out, but even if we didn't do either of those, one of the ways to help that building be more of a positive presence on the sidewalk is something I happen to adore in downtowns. I hug the buildings, as many of us do when it's raining or when it's incredibly hot or it's snowing, buildings that have awnings. And so it's an exploration on how the garage could add that element, and even as doing it, improve the appearance of it. So this is not your standard canvas awning. Instead, it's a glass element with lights as built into the design of it, so it gives it a sense of lightness. I don't know if some of you can describe it better than I'm doing. But the idea behind the awning is to be a pedestrian amenity. How the costs sort itself out, we're still exploring, but this at this point is where we are with our exploration. I think that's the new and improved. You see the sense of translucence, and the idea is to design it in a way that at night this would appear as if it's glowing. The same way Library Lane has that beautiful lightness to it. This is where Carl is trying to draw the imagery for the garage.
These enhancements, these improvements are regardless of the use of the space. It's very downstairs.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it is at this point in your packet is a menu. As the committee's exploring it, the stair and elevator can go forward, and this doesn't have to happen. This could happen whether or not the retail takes place. The retail could take place even if the awning doesn't. The exploration is to understand what are the ways in which the garage can be more of an enhancement to this section of town. And at some point, the committee will come back with a recommendation about project elements we would like the board to approve supporting.
Or it may also be viewed as a master plan that can be phased in over time.
This is just how the awning is suspended. More about the build out on the first floor. You start to see the expiration of William Street. In this illustration, Republic Parking has vacated its offices. We've taken it over and taken over a couple parking spaces. And you're starting to see the exploration about how ground floor uses could integrate in then with what is now facade improvements and awning and the stair elevator improvement. We also, as part of our exploration, don't get frightened anyone who was part of the council debate, we explored what if we had signage up on the garage that would be of interest and use to the folks at Blake Transit Center right across the street. We immediately put aside this electronic billboard, saying this probably would not be something the community would embrace, but it is interesting how quickly you stop looking at the largeness of the garage and instead your eye is drawn right to, you know, CNN playing on the big screen. What is less visible and something that we're looking to explore a little further is right below the big sign, there are these LED signage boards that are an opportunity for us to work in partnership with ATA with information about the transit. It doesn't have to be done at this point, but it could be information saying the number 9 is delayed by construction, the number 12, you know, showing up any time now, just the date and time for those of us that use the bus. I gotta say, I'm riding it on the weekend and I know it comes at 6:18, but I have no watch on me. What time is it?
I like showing up anytime now. We promise, don't leave. You know.
Stay right there. So it's an exploration around messaging that, again, helps to distract the eye from the bulk of the building. Again, we may or may not be pursuing that. This is, as John said, the latest iteration. You saw the earlier facade improvement. It's been refined. It still has the glowing nature. It's still meant to be lighter than what's there now. You can barely read it, but it says the 4th and William parking structure. Obviously, that would be made more bold, but it is a illuminated sign with the sign element having, I think the electronics are behind it. John, do you want to describe that at all?
Yeah, I think the plan is for it to be LED lighting with, it's really almost more of signage than it is of a building element.
Yeah.
And part of it is that it probably be pretty cost effective to have done too, because sign companies could build these panels.
As a piece of it.
Yeah.
And while we're on the subject of this illuminated signage, one of the elements of the project planning also involves working with Carl Walker to add electrical capacity to the garage. 1950s garage, we've reached pretty close to the limit, and yet the demand for things like those electric vehicle charging units continues to grow. No matter what we do with the build out for retail or otherwise, we need to do things like keep after the electrical and other utilities in the garage. So not sexy, but important.
Should I just go back one real fast? Just a second. So I know everyone's anti-giant digital billboard, and I would tend to agree with that kind of general principles, but I don't want people to get afraid of things that would be messaging or signage that's that big if it's not digital. There are certainly ways to have something that could be considered an advertisement, whether it's for a local organization or a project that the city's doing or that we're doing, that would be technically an advertisement, but would at the same time be a significant improvement aesthetically over the old parking structure with the barren shells, right? You know, the perfect example is some of our own work. The AATA bus shelters that are along 4th Avenue there, technically for all reasons of our own, those are ads for the city and other organizations and the AATA, but it's really a giant photograph of Arbor Dam with people canoeing on it, right? So it looks better than the blank wall of the federal building, even though it is technically an advertisement, it's technically a billboard. So I guess I just want to keep open minds to not just saying no to everything that could be considered an advertisement, as long as we have significant control over what that message is and how what it looks like. It's it's still our piece of wall that we get to say what goes and what doesn't go. Having messaging up there can actually be a big improvement over empty parking structure, and also be a good place for especially local organizations and city projects and public projects to get messaging out, which is needed. So.
Yeah, and I think, no, it's a great speech, because I think that was where our thoughts were as well. You immediately stop looking at the garage, you're so focused on what that is. So as we
Did you
explore
get
it.
feedback that said no electronic sign?
Well, there was a debate at council, 6 months ago, that I think was rather heated, and a lot of concerns focused on the U of M sign that's on Stadium. And actually before that, there was the outdoor billboard discussion. And what we heard was a lot of people in the community not excited about those electronic signs. And so this exploration wasn't meant to suggest we're going to do it, but rather what would it look like? And I don't know if the others want to talk about it.
We also wanted to look at the cost, and the cost was not shockingly high. So that really kind of
it gets less high when you're selling the space for a few $1,000s every 30 seconds for every day all year. But
we didn't look at
but then you don't have control over what goes on it.
But you can have control over what goes on it by leasing the sign. So that you require a certain amount of information and a certain amount of advertising.
Well, and I just want to say, I think that when people say we're going to put a giant ad on the parking structure, your instant reaction is no, don't do that. And being our parking structure, we can put whatever requirements on that message. Stop calling an astronaut message that we want. So we say, okay, sure, you can put a thing up there, but you have to be a nonprofit, and we need to approve the art, and we need to approve what it looks like, and it needs to contribute to the aesthetics of the corridor in some way, and that we shouldn't just instantly say no bad because it's messaging of some sort.
I think a significant aspect too is that this was presented in the context of a design element for this structure, and in my mind, we can design all kinds of things, but I think what's very important is the idea of the management of it. Goes a little bit with what we're talking about plazas and parks, eyes on, and who's gonna manage it, which I think is significant, and may take us in a new direction, which may be great, but I think we have to put the infrastructure in to do that, and what that means.
We didn't actually talk about what would go on it.
Right.
That wasn't even part of the discussion when we were even looking at it.
And to be honest, that's really the important thing. So for instance, it may be that if we wanted to do such a thing, this may not be the structure or the place to do it. You know what I mean?
Well, I've actually put a lot of thought into that's what we would put on that structure, because I'm constantly looking for places to put messaging. And even had discussions, at least with Rishi and other folks, originally we were talking about parking downtown, just, what would be a good service we could provide to some of these people that are already doing events downtown. And one of those things is, if we had more inventory of places to put messaging, that would be a good place for us to very inexpensively contribute to these people that are already doing great things downtown, and we could, just lend support to, whatever, to Sonic Lunch or whatever. So I think that honestly the AATA bus shelters are the perfect example. If you walk down 4th, those have been there for a year and a half now, and that's what I think is a good example of technically an ad, but it doesn't look like one. It's an improvement over what was there. They're supporting local events and organizations, and also a pretty thing to look at. So, and I would say, I can tell you off the top of my head what those things cost too, so.
I think what really caught our attention was the very high cost of doing something like that.
Digital, anyway, we didn't talk about it.
One other aspect, if we do at some point want to pursue this for any of the parking structures, is it was pointed out at the meeting that we don't have the information about the weight of that thing. Mm-hmm. And I want to point out, parking structures aren't initially designed to add significant load on the facades of them. So it's the kind of thing that if there's a point at which we really want to explore it seriously, that would be a very significant piece to look into, whether they can support such a thing.
Yeah.
And that might be a technical thing that could be answered pretty easily, and not spend a ton of time on
Yeah, I think even originally, we were just thinking, prior to the stairwell renovations going forward, we could just cover that brick wall, that big empty brick wall with something, you know, as a simple, quick fix, but that's obviously moved now. I was thinking that, maybe not we.
Can it be more work on the part of our engineers to figure things out? Okay, now we're going to do the ground floor. So looking at the garage, this is actually a photo taken while we were adding a floor to the garage. Today we would be staring at the fairy garden, and we're sorry to say, but if the project went forward, we might be giving the fairies a new home address because we might be using that corner. But that's what it looks like today. I have my pointer. To give you a sense of use, right there under the speed ramp, we punched a hole. That's where Greyhound is operating. This over here, there we go. Republic Parking has some offices over here, a couple parking spaces, and that part where the Greyhound is, that's a speed ramp. And then beyond that is parking, and it terminates with a series of bike hoops, bike parking. So as we were looking at this space, we started to explore what could we, if we did, add downstairs retail space. The idea started with the Connecting William Street work that the DDA did 2 years ago. That project, as you may remember, involved the DDA working with the community to assemble a series of redevelopment strategies for council approval, which utilized the Klein lot, which is the South Ashley lot, that's Ashley and William, the Polio lot, which is the lot at Main and William, this ground floor of the parking garage, the Old Y lot, which is the 5th and William parking lot, and the top of the Library Lane garage. Those 5 parcels. The Connecting William plan was working with the goal of animating William Street, which right now has about as little activity as any section of our downtown, despite having these enormous and important downtown anchors, including the library, which has almost 600,000 people walking through those doors. The garage with its 1,000 spaces. We've got the Blake Center with 5,000 people a day estimated to be using it. For all the people in the neighborhood, for odd reasons, and actually for design reasons, we're not seeing many of them. So the idea in that plan was to reuse some of the parking spaces on the ground floor of 4th and William for uses that would help us to energize that section of town, help to bridge the 2 lots, Klein and Polio, with the other 2 lots, the Old Y lot and Library Lane. What you see here is an early exploration. Go back. We are on William, and this is 4th. Currently, Republic Parking has offices in this location. There are a couple parking spaces here. The Fairy Garden is right there. And what is being explored is if we use those spaces, there's an existing bathroom, and we collected that whole area together, approximately 2,500 square feet gross square footage could be assembled. On the 4th Avenue side, this is the Greyhound. I showed you under the speed ramp, and there's the speed ramp. If we took the parking spaces that face onto 4th and the spaces interior to the garage and shifted the drive lane interior to the building, that amount of square footage we'd end up with is approximately 4,800 gross square feet. As we've been developing this, we've been exploring how that could then be utilized for this retail purpose. That gives you sort of a sense of what the space is that we'd be looking at. In this location, I think I see it here, yeah, they have, the engineers are starting to develop a concept of how the space could be broken up. It's important to note that on William and on 4th, there are differences in the height of the sidewalk and the height of the garage. So some of the early exploration had to focus on how ADA compliant entrances could enter off the sidewalk into the garage. And then that also helps us determine how the space could be broken up. We met with commercial broker. Some of what we learned, we shared with the engineering team that there is a lot of demand for retail space, that this space likely, particularly being on 4th Avenue is becoming a very interesting retail corridor. Might help to complement some of the other retail, the new and interesting entrepreneurial retail happening on 4th Avenue. That the street frontage is really important, so that exercise about pushing the drive lanes into the interior of the garage and maximizing the amount of street frontage that is available on 4th Avenue. We were heading in the right direction. We looked at that Fairy Garden, and the recommendation was to clip the corner at 4th and Williams so that you have sort of a diagonal point at the garage where you can actually get around. Potbelly's at State Street or the Verizon store here at 4th and Washington are two examples where you can kind of cut the corner. 4th and Washington is another example. You can kind of cut the corner. And you can sort of see some of the other things that were being discussed. Some of the other things that we talked about with them was a recommendation from the broker to create flex space. Instead of building interior walls, create an open space. An example for us, at least in my mind, is to look at the Carytown shops. It is one larger space, and yet each entrepreneur, each retailer has their own reserve space, and at night they chain it off. And so Monahan's is separated from Sparrow, which is separated from Cosmo Deli, but during the day it operates as a single larger space. They also thought that was important because if, as it's pursued, retail is not the eventual use of this, say it doesn't work, it can then lend itself to being used in other ways, office as an example. They also noted, we thought for sure they would say William Street was the predominant location. They said no, the 4th Avenue space also has enormous value and merit. So both the William Street build-out and the 4th Avenue build-out, both would be interesting to potential tenants. Here you see that larger space being broken out with, say, a chain that would cordon off, I'm not doing that very well, but a gate that could be drawn across the ceiling and closing off a particular space. What you'll also see here is an attempt to understand that ADA compliant question. Again, there being only a couple points around the sidewalk, we can have an ADA compliant entrance, but yet these other spaces need to be accessible to all customers. So a walkway in the back enables all of them to serve everyone. Here's also an exploration about adding bathroom facilities. We met with the building official, and if we went forward, there'd be a two single-use bathrooms in this location and on William Street. I don't know if others want to join me in any kind of details around this or the William Street, which is the next image. But that's the general construct, is a general larger space that could be broken out. It also means that as tenants come in, they may not want 800 feet, they may want 900 feet. So rather than drawing the line ahead of time, this allows the marketplace to help dictate. There's William Street broken out with 2 entrances and an ADA compliant entrance. And again, there's that exploration.
One of the ideas I think behind that as well was that it gives us flexibility moving forward for the use of the space if the incubator concept were not to progress like we wanted. It would not be a huge cost to break down, tear down walls, redesign a space, or for future use. That obviously not being what we're trying to look at all aspects of a project like this to make sure that we're not, we have pivot, with ways to pivot and hedge our bets, things like that.
And as a piece of that, another thing that was being explored, this is a 1950s garage. You've seen Library Lane, we now build with lovely ceiling heights. Well, in the 1950s, the garages were long and low. Those big, beautiful Cadillacs with those fins. These low ceiling heights, sort of a remnant of those older days. But how do people fit in that space? And so you see here an exploration of how much ceiling height someone might have in that office. And it was trying to understand how comfortable and how attractive could that be. The general sense is it could work. If you've been to the Menlo offices and the Tally Hall building, it's a parking garage, but actually it's kind of cool. It's got that authentic urban feel. There would be no attempt to hide this. This is going to be in a garage. What would be done if it were pursued is you can see the early illustration of what would be a waterproofing element, because again, this is a parking garage, steel and concrete, and those things drip water. And so trying to sort of illustrate how we could create a very comfortable, human-centered environment, even as we allow rough concrete floors and the columns. It is a 1950s garage. There'd be no attempt to hide it. And there's more examination. I forgot what that one is. Do anybody remember what that is?
It's the south entrance on 4th.
Okay.
With the ramp.
The ramp.
Barrier-free access ramp.
There we go. Thank you. You saw this image earlier. This is that translucent awning. And what you're seeing to the left is what that retail space might feel like as you walk down a sidewalk. We met with the building official. The openness of garages is something many of us don't think about, But the fact of closing off an office brings up the question, how much of the garage needs to remain open rather than triggering the need for sprinklers? And so what they've done is gone through in a detailed way what that might look like. So the project costs, if this was pursued, is greater than a simple office because we need to address building code issues because now there's a mix of uses that a parking garage itself doesn't require. More about the code issues that we should be anticipating. The project budget, at least initially, was on the high side for this space. They've brought it back down. Rishi made this point earlier. We don't need pretty. At $330 a square foot, which includes soft costs, we'd end up with pretty. If we had a rough space, including a 25% soft cost, we're closer to the $265 square foot. Because again, that's engendering all the other code required changes to the rest of the garage. You can see with a big price tag like that, we're not rushing into doing any kind of immediate approvals. And one of the last steps is they've recommended that with Art Lowe's help and Republic Parking's help, that we run a couple test drives of what it might look like to shift that drive lane interior to the building. So with Joe's help and Art's help, looking to actually try, as much as I've talked about with Fifth and Division, try it. Can people actually make it? That might cause us to reduce the size of the garage if we need bigger drive lanes, for instance. So actually trying in a piloted way might refine that 4,800 gross square feet to something smaller. We asked for a schedule, although we're not jumping right into it, just to give us a sense of how this might look, that 3 phases of the stairwell I mentioned earlier. We're going to continue with refinement of our design over the fall months. If this was pursued, you'll see construction documents and all of that. Obviously, we would come to the DDA before any of that would be brought to any kind of formal action. But meanwhile, the stair and the elevator work continues. They're underway with some construction drawings on the stair elevator. If this schedule holds true, we could get a lot of this work done beginning with the next construction season, really beginning with the new year, and continuing over, as I said, the second construction season. So that's their exploration of what a construction schedule might look like. And the budget, those are the numbers you saw earlier. The stair elevator, rough estimates $3 million. The entrance, the improvements, $620,000. If the awning was pursued, that $1,175,000 has been reduced to $900,000. They did some costing and discovered they had added a couple elements. And then here's some of their exploration of some of the other elements. And again, you see the refined numbers on your menu in the board packet. And we, of course, made sure that they are covering things like contingencies and soft costs and so forth. So this is really, I think, where we are at this point. The facade, $2 million that you saw in your packet, just to walk you through this, this is that exploration around glass. And what you see here on the lower 3 levels of the garage is the integration of glass panels. These panels would have a solar collector on them. And the idea being that the energy generated from these glass panels could help to fuel the energy used inside the garage. An example is, the electronics for our parking equipment. Here you sort of see it again, where those glass panels find themselves on the 4th Avenue side with an awning. Here's what at least is an early exploration of glass panels, how to dress up the garage. I think the total cost for this was about $2 million, which is what drove us to explore other ideas like the billboard and other things. And that may be the last of our slides. I think that's the last of our slides. John, Rishi, John, and Roger, anything else to add to the presentation?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to add something. This is a little bit in the same vein as something Ray was alluding to earlier, I think, with Liberty Plaza, in that you can go just so far thinking about the design of things, but you have to kind of return to how it's going to be managed and what are you trying to accomplish. So I think it's going to be very important for this to go, when it goes to go back to committee. And I don't know whether operations or partnerships would look at sort of what are we trying to accomplish with the concepts, incubator retail, what is a measure of success, what is what are the expectations? Because it's if we were to move forward, it's expensive space. So we have to feel comfortable and confident that that is going to fit into our mission of trying to promote private reinvestment downtown. We're going to help create some new retail businesses that will go from having a 300 square foot space to a 3,000 square foot space. So, and it's an area that's new for all of us. So I think the more that we can understand what our expectations might be, and then what it would take to manage to get us there, would probably help people feel comfortable when the time comes to make a decision about it. Because, in my opinion, we can. It doesn't have to be pretty. It almost doesn't want to be pretty for incubator space. It's mainly providing that function rather than that design, if you know what I mean. Just a space where somebody can try to get a foothold. And
well, and I think there's for me at least, the real benefit to us and to our mission isn't necessarily those businesses which start there, but it's that activated corridor which then supports everything else. It's a, all of the bricks have to be in place for everything for it to stand up, and this kind of fills in a corridor that's really, kind of a dead zone. That we addressed the Fifth Avenue and the Division ones that we talked about earlier. How do we address that dead zone? I know there's supposedly a restaurant going in there. I don't know where that's at, but we do have the transit center there, which is awesome. So how do we get those people to, instead of just instantly jetting out in other directions, to kind of fill in the holes? So that's the benefit that I see, as opposed to, are all these businesses going to become bigger and then buy bigger places right down the street? So
for what it's worth, along those lines, the restaurant you're mentioning, the old, I think of Maud's, but that's way back when. What was it most recently called?
It was the Dream Nightclub.
Dream Nightclub. So a restaurant's going in there, but Susan and I found out at that design review committee that we learned about earlier that the design of that is going to be very turned inward. They're not really putting glass in, they're not making it particularly pedestrian friendly. So what we have in mind for this is activating the sidewalk more than a restaurant may do. Obviously the restaurant is important, is a good thing, will draw people, but it doesn't sort of address that pedestrian experience.
I think one of the big things we learned was that the project scope and the costs and what's involved is big enough and costly enough that we really need to come together with a full package. We can't just go forward with this and then figure out the rest later. We need to figure out, is there a need for retail incubator space, which I personally think there is, but I'd also like to prove it with data, so we should probably put that out there. We should come up with metrics on what we judge as success, so that we don't. Success for us is not having made money on the on rent. Success for us is activating the corridor, retail businesses spinning out into downtown. That is success for us, and something that who was at the finance meeting, the city CFO. Tom Crawford kind of mentioned to us is that something to keep in mind is that he doesn't see retail businesses as an economic driver. It's just one of those things that keeps, it doesn't bring the jobs in, but it keeps when businesses come in and they want to move downtown, it keeps their employees and residents excited and staying downtown and gives them things to do. So, we're kind of, it was interesting for me to hear him say that and kind of put that in with this, is that we really have to kind of look at all aspects of it. And since the space just doesn't exist and it's not there, it's not as simple as just turning it on. We're doing a lot of work to make it happen. And as much as, I think it's a unique and cool idea, and it's not even completely unique. There are other examples of this in Michigan even. So, maybe we need to look to them and interview some people and see what were the pros and cons and things that went wrong in their first year, so we can really kind of itemize them. So we learned a lot, I think, just even finding out what the costs were, because it really kind of drove home, this isn't just a cool idea kind of thing. It's okay, we better figure this out.
And to that, this is a big number. And what we, I think, need to have a discussion on is, okay, if we do this, what don't we do?
What don't we do? Yeah, exactly.
What don't we do, and it's what we don't do potentially more important than this. There are lots of needs, and there's, we look at the list of ideas, and they're far more than our resources are. So that needs to be a discussion of.
And we've gone from having
before.
one person who's a downer about everything to both, two of you.
Well, and
Roger's
to sort
rubbing off on me.
to sort of repeat, Rishi, our return on investment is not only the rent that we receive, but it's also creating a sense of place.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Susan, it brings to mind, I know in Traverse City, for instance, there's a parking structure that has retail, and it's sort of an off location. I don't know whether you've had the opportunity to talk to other
Just in a
authorities about
beginning
this.
way.
But that might be worth making some calls. And,
I think I need a trip up there, don't you?
There you go.
Maybe it should be beautiful colors
Yes.
up there.
Yeah, but I think
going
your
up
point's- I think
October,
your
I'll
point's
fill
well
you in.
taken. I always like the idea of trying to look at other folks that have done similar things. How's it working? What would they do differently?
Some of it is the operational pieces that are going to be unique to us, and so meeting with groups like Think Local First, meeting with the area association. I mean, this is unique to Ann Arbor. What are they seeing, and how do they see us being able to provide support? And frankly, is it something that we can do elsewhere and not just in a single location? So that work needs to be done.
I think the hierarchy to address, just what Roger's talking about, is saying, okay, instead of looking at this as a solution that we're evaluating, looking at it as the problem first, and saying, okay, we're addressing this dead spot. Where are our other dead spots? Is this the first one we want to go after, and is this the best way to do it? And that kind of organizes it fairly easily for us. For me.
It's good. Great.
Next committee
Next meeting is Wednesday, September 30th at 8:30 a.m.
You're saying September 24th.
That's,
Oh, I'm sorry, I've got finance.
That's finance. No.
Wednesday, September 24th at 11 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other audience participation. Someone moving forward. I would like to remind you about 4 minutes.
Thank you.
I provided a copy of these comments to Susan Polly in advance of my presentation. Thank you for your time. I wish to address 2 issues this afternoon. One is copyrights on maps produced and distributed by the DDA, and the other is the public notice of the Bill's Beer Garden meeting. The DDA maintains a map that was created by the City of Ann Arbor showing the official boundaries of the DDA. I believe that you have several maps up here that exhibit the same characteristics, although they're not on the DDA website. It's an essential document that defines the DDA area and should be readily available to everyone. However, the map contains the following copyright notice. No part of this product shall be reproduced or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic or mechanical, for any purpose without prior written permission from the City of Ann Arbor. This is an unreasonable copyright notice and should be replaced promptly and at the very minimum with a copyright notice explicitly allowing reuse. Secondly, regarding the Bill's Beer Garden meeting, a notice that I received during this meeting from the Twitter account that Bill's Beer Garden maintains noted that the venue is not open until 5:30 p.m. to the public, even though the published meeting time is 5 o'clock p.m. In interest in following both the letter and the spirit of the Michigan Open Meetings Act, which states in part, all meetings of a public body shall be open to the public and should be held in a place available to the general public. The signage at Bill's Beer Garden must make it clear to the public that a public meeting is taking place at the venue, that the general public is available to attend. In particular, for this particular venue, there is a concern that since this venue serves alcohol, there may be restrictions on individuals to attend who are under the legal drinking age, yet who are able to vote. Thank you for your time.
As a follow-up, I'd like to reinforce and have people realize that this is not intended to be a meeting. No business is intended on being carried out. It is
simply a social gathering. And it's something I would ask, though, to look into the time when it's open. If we're all standing there at the gate for a half hour. Thank you. So, do we have any other folks who'd like to speak?
Thank you. My name is Chen-Ming Fan.
Yeah,
I want to cut very short. I know the 4 minutes.
Oh, hold on. You've already spoken. I think we can't allow a second time. Okay, you've got 2 minutes. We're getting close to 2
I want to cut
o'clock.
very short. I want to say fully support investor program, but I want to add 2 things. One is electronic and digital communication, and secondly is the framework linking with the rest area of this town. There are a lot of social problems generated because of the highly development. It's a new problem, and it's bound to happen. We have to solve the problem between the haves and have-not, the downtown and the rest area. That's one solution is technology, digital technology and media. And 2 gentlemen are here, Rishi and Al. I'm very happy that they speak something which is a really one focus. The other day, I were trying to find out, is there electronic things of the 2 companies? Is there? And there isn't. Therefore, I want to say, Ann Arbor is aging, young people is moving. One of the reasons is that you have to solve the need. The need is not just current and future, and it's also extremely important between the economic development and the social coherence. We are not developing downtown just for earn the money. As the town clerk said that, it is also very important that people get together. So, Tiny Light like to contribute this technology using this key information focused, not graphic, to let the city know that we're welcome to come in and then easily get out, whether to the nearby park or out of the town. So again, Tiny Light like to use wireless communication, web technology, and LEDs. So I'm looking forward, like John Speak, support us to show what is Tiny Light can help the city, why we're here to want to make the city better, more coherent, and fair. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any other folks wish to speak? Seeing none, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn. Second.
All in support?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.